Good afternoon and good morning to those of you out west. Welcome to today's democast from the Construction Specifier and Deltek. My name is Jason. I'm the executive editor for the Construction Specifier, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. Just to cover a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any questions during today's democast, please enter them using the Q&A section, which you can find at the bottom of your Zoom window. We will address as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Zoom does have a raise hand function, but since we'll be keeping everyone's mics muted, please use the Q&A instead. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties during the democast, you can enter a message in the chat, which you'll find right next to the Q&A, and we'll do our best to help. Today's democast is being recorded and will be available on the Construction Specifier's website by this time next week. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Nick Chin. Nick is the Solutions Engineer at Deltek. He specializes in the Specification Solutions product line at Deltek. As a Solutions Engineer, Nick shares with the AEC community the advantages of connecting software to master spec specifications. In today's democast, Free Up Your Time, 3 Steps to Easier Specs, Nick will discuss how Deltek SpecPoint software will help you make better product selections with the most up-to-date product details in one place. Provide designers insight into product selections to specify the right products, and author specifications quickly and accurately so teams can invest their time in more valuable tasks. Nick, we appreciate you joining us today. Please take it away.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you everyone for joining. As Jason mentioned, we'll be going over an introduction to SpecPoint, the new home for master spec. Before we get into a demo, I wanted to discuss some of the challenges that we saw, some of the obstacles that we saw within the industry, as well as kind of how the traditional approach was problematic in regards to specifications, just to kind of set the framework for how we thought about this new software. We'll then go into a demonstration and then wrap up with this few closing remarks and any questions you guys have to answer. So again, when it comes to specifications, there are 5 key challenges that we were seeing that the industry was facing. The first and most obvious of which is the lack of cross-disciplinary collaboration, which creates silos of information, especially as teams are moving from phase to phase for different deliverables. Having separate teams that are responsible for those deliverables really does lack a continuation or building on previous information. Secondly, the limited time available for education and research and development for specifications, along with the difficulty of keeping up with the sheer volume of products and their ever-evolving properties and standards. That is something that takes a lot of time for people to understand. For those that are less familiar with specifications, how exactly to go about approaching specifications, and again, just having a better way to access product information from manufacturers was something that we're seeing as well. Producing a project manual is highly inefficient as well. One, because of the complexities of today's projects, but secondly, we're seeing a poor utilization of some of the technology that could be helping folks. And then finally, this is something that we're seeing across various industries, but combating the knowledge erosion within AE firms as technical experts have become scarce. We know that there is a shortage of specification writers within the AE industry. So finding a way to involve more people within the process and giving them confidence to contribute in a meaningful way. So the visual that I'm showing right now is depicting the typical deliverables, as I was kind of mentioning before, this idea of silos of information between each phases. Also is giving a percentage of the approximate amount of time spent at each phase as well. And between each phase, there's inevitably going to be informational gaps, communication gaps, due to the fact that there are often different members, as I was mentioning before, involved at each phase. Separate deliverables are created, and there's a lack of continuity of information that can easily be built upon as projects move along the life cycle. Additionally, the technical information is not provided or considered early enough, which often leads to reconfirmation or reconsideration of previous decisions. SpecPoint is changing that narrative by providing both the uniformat and master format classifications throughout the entirety of the project. assemblies, which we're going to be shifting towards in kind of how we're focusing, including specification content, which is utilizing the uniformat side of things, is allowing design and functional elements of a building to be included earlier in the process and can be influenced by more people that typically wouldn't be involved in the specifications as well. As the project evolves, those working on the specifications can then build upon those decisions to include more detail and information in a more progressive nature. So again, meaning that there's no need to create separate deliverables for a project description, short form to the full length specifications as we're seeing here. It's more of a continuum of information. So again, project architects, specifiers, designers, members of structural services, and/or construction administration can all have meaningful input throughout the entirety of the project. So all of this is, again, leading to the vision for SpecPoint and the framework of how this software was developed and some of the things that we were thinking about at Deltek when creating this platform. So for one, SpecPoint will help users build specifications efficiently and accurately with data-driven product decisions. This is the main piece that we're going to be focusing on today and the main piece of automation that we're providing right out of the gate with SpecPoint. By unleashing data insights in product evaluation and selection, users across the organization can feel more confident in contributing information to the specifications. Secondly, we want to remove the silos between designers and BPMs. Again, we want to be able to provide all the relevant information that is needed for AEs to be provided by building product manufacturers to make sure that they have the most accurate, up-to-date, and consistent product information. We know there's just too many products to manage, and while we need to rely on the product experts, we need a better platform to make it easier to communicate the current information gaps that we have. Third, we want to bring MasterSpec into a single platform focusing on the user experience. Collaboration among the team depends on a great process, but a tool that can facilitate collaboration is just as critical. Combining powerful insights, the ease of editing, and a great user interface and the MasterSpec content our users come to trust was and is the main focal point in developing SpecPoint. Fourth, allowing firms to accelerate review of project and specification changes. That not only means markups and notes, but also the extraction of key data, including selection trends, adherence to best practices, and helpful reporting on projects. And then finally, we want to enable BIM and automation technologies to improve the design process. A modern specification tool needs to align with BIM tools. We understand that there is a great uptake and requirement for BIM in modern projects, yet the misalignment between the non-graphic and graphic information, we're finding is stifling meaningful integration. So with that being said, and now that the stage is kind of set, I'm going to transition to our demonstration of SpecPoint. All right, so we're going to start everything off on the project homepage. Here we can see some of our recent projects up above for quick access, things that we have worked on within the past that we want just to be able to grab and go to. And then we have a listing of all of our projects down below. This is a way to organize some of your projects. The highest level of organization is the project groups. So we have a couple different groupings that we have here with corresponding projects. And then additionally, we're offering a table that allows some filters. So if you want to be able to, especially as this list continues to grow and becomes a little bit larger, being able to find projects based on things like project manager, building type, etc. Also within recent projects, we can start to see on these overview cards some of the project details and information tied to the project. Some of this information will be contributing to how the content will be updated and populate kind of based on some of this information. But for now, this is just some of the information that users will be required to put into the system as they're creating. So I'm going to go into the overview for this project. We have a couple different things here. Again, the project overview, some of that information that we saw from before. We have a design progress table that is listing out all the different elements. For right now, you can think of elements as kind of like the way of breaking out some of our different specification sections. We'll describe that and give a little bit more context in just a moment. We also have the state, which is an indication of what stage they're in as tracking towards completion. So if it's in review, needing review, complete, users across the organization can understand where those elements sit. We can see who is it's assigned to, when it was last modified, and we can see a current and target LOS. LOS is in reference to level of specification. This is one of the ways that we're hoping to align better with BIM and the graphic side of things with the non-graphical information. So in reference to level of specification, kind of borrowing from level of development, which is often used in the BIM world, so that we can use similar targets of completeness and detail for the non-graphic side of things. We then have our teams down below. This is a way to understand who's kind of more in charge of what. As an example, I have some members within the architectural team. I have within this as well, their discipline, project role, and description. This is a great way to kind of understand who's focused on what. So I have Andrew, who is our architectural designer. I have him focusing on product selection. And I have Ted, who is our architectural engineer. He's determining our assemblies. All right, so I'm going to move over to the workspace. And want to kind of give you guys a little bit of lay of the land. This is obviously a little bit of a different layout than anything within MasterSpec has provided. MasterSpec has digitally transformed to be a little bit more adaptive and enable automation within SpecPoint. So this layout is really crucial to that. So for the first thing that we have over here on the far left side, we have our categories. This is a general organization of our assemblies. And just to speak a little bit about the importance of assemblies, again, we're kind of taking more of an assemblies-driven approach within SpecPoint. If teams are starting to identify assemblies as they initially start planning for a project, this is allowing the team to start to gather specification information sooner in the process. It also helps users build better specifications because they're focusing on the sum of the parts versus individual components. We think of the case of like a window. It's obviously not just the window that we need to think about when it's being installed. We also need to consider the framing, the walls. Some of that information is usually found in other specification sections. So taking an assembly-driven approach is kind of having all those elements considered sooner into the process. It also makes it easier for model information to be better coordinated with specifications because, again, we're using similar language as assemblies are often used and referred to within BIM models. We then have our project elements. I'm just going to choose one of the categories here. We're going to choose the ceiling category. I'm just going to hide this from view. And then we have our elements underneath, which are how our assemblies are broken into related family and product types. So assemblies at the assembly level, I'm going to take this suspended ceiling construction. We can start to see some performance requirements and for the ability to start adding in information earlier in the design. So I'm going to add a ceiling attenuation class of 30. I'm also just going to add a noise reduction coefficient of 0.9. Okay. So as we start to dive deeper into the assemblies and sub-assemblies, we're going to start to see some family ties within here. And this is going to be our first kind of part where we're going to start to see some familiar information. We're going to start to see things like the section number, section title. We're also going to start to see some of the specification content that we're familiar with. As an example, 1.1 within part 1 general for the summary article of this section. So with the specification content that's tied to the family, this is going to be information that will relate to administrative properties, obviously, as well as properties that are going to relate to all the product types that are listed below. So we have a couple different product types listed below here. If I go into acoustical panels, particularly within part 2, it's really going to focus in on that product specific content. I'm going to contain, the product specific performance properties, characteristics, and material selection. So as we dive into this, again, this is going to be specific to our product. If we go to general, we're not going to see much because we don't have anything enabled. If I go to show our shared properties, it's going to show some of, again, those performance requirements that are going to relate to this product specifically. Whereas if I go to the family, we're going to see much more information within part 1. And if I go to part 2, it's going to relate to all the product types underneath it. Also just wanted to show over here on the far right hand side, we have our project properties, which I have turned on by this button here. And this is going to be feeding into that design progress table where we can start to assign it to specific members, specific elements to specific members. We can declare state that it's in, and then the current and target level specifications. So this format is obviously a little bit different, so that different product types that may relate to different assemblies, but the same family can be edited and changed more easily without sorting through the entirety of a section. It's going to relate to the entirety of an assembly and kind of thinking through systems versus having to remember what section might be referring to a particular element that needs to change. It's also important to note that this is only in reference to the workspace. Just want to show you guys a quick preview of this so that you can see once that the final product is created, it's going to be in the familiar layout that you're used to as kind of like a Word type document. All right, so the main piece of automation available within View 1 is really around product selection. So I'm going to go to this acoustical panels product type. I'm going to hide our shared properties. So we just have our acoustical panels portion of this section. So the first thing that you'll notice probably is these orange pills that we have here. This is the new way that we're representing options. And I'm going to go ahead and minimize this to also show our product selection tool. I'm going to kind of have this in the background. So these are all the products available for this specific product type of acoustical panels. Just going to kind of have this pulled off to the side so we can kind of see that while we're working within here. So the main idea that we're providing within the first release of SpecPoint is that as we start to add certain parameters within a section or an assembly or elements, it's going to start to help make sure that whatever products we're picking with it is aligned with those selections. So I'm going to just add a smooth pattern to this acoustical panels. And we'll start to see in the background that this is going to be changing to make sure that it's relating to whatever it is that we're going to want to bring in. So now we just have these two products to choose from versus the entirety of the list that we saw from before, because these two products do include a smooth pattern. We can understand some of the product properties by clicking into the product. I'm just going to resize this a little bit. As I scroll down, we can see some of the classifications provided with it. So we see that the pattern is smooth, and there's some other information within here as well, edge joint detail, as well as modular size. So again, this is kind of leading to clash detection to make sure that whatever you're specifying is aligning with whatever products you're going to pick. This will also feed the specification content as well. So if I go to add this product to our project, okay, I'm going to close out of this. We'll start to see in the background that the edge and joint detail, as well as the modular size, is going to match whatever that product had listed from before. More properties will be added in Intelligent for better clash detection, especially as you guys are starting to identify products that fit specifications with more detail. This product selection piece, however, can be done at the family level as well. So I'm going to reposition this a little bit. I'm just going to hide our project properties, turn back on our categories. And I'm going to go to Windows down here at the bottom. We're going to go to exterior windows, exterior operating windows. We're going to go to vinyl. And then we're going to go to the vinyl windows family. So I'm going to pull up the product selection piece again. So now we're going to see all the products that are related to the family. So if this had multiple product types underneath it, we'd be able to see all the related products at the family level. So I'm just going to add this premium vinyl windows and patio doors. Again, I'm going to add this product to our project. So we're going to start to see all the elements be turned on in green versus from before when we had a pre-added element to this. So it's going to manipulate our content inclusions. And we'll start to see that up the tree all the way up to the assemblies in just a moment. We're going to start to see everything at the top turn green at the highest level of the assemblies, all the way down to the product type. There we go. So we can see that all those elements were brought into our project. And because we had already picked a specific product within this product type, we can see that we have that gelled when window that we had brought in be specified within here as well through the pill selection. All right, so for those that are less familiar with assemblies, we do have a couple different workarounds to work within here as well. The first of which is around our search functionality. So I'm going to turn this back on to our all categories. I'm going to type in gypsum board. This does work as a fuzzy search as well. So if I just kind of partially spell that, I'm going to make sure that we're only searching on family information. So I'm going to deselect assemblies and product types. And then when I go to execute the search, we'll start to see all the instances where gypsum board is included within a family. So again, we have the same section name and number, but there's just going to be different assemblies are going to be tied to it. So if you do have both a stairs and maybe a wall for subgrade enclosures, maybe you have a change that's only relating to stairs, the stairs assembly. That doesn't mean that you have to necessarily go to the section and understand how that's going to impact that specific assembly. You can just change it at the assembly level since it's already grouped in that way. The other workaround that we have within this is our work results category over here down at the bottom. And this is going to be how we're going to start to subdivide our divisions, but kind of reframing it as assemblies. So within this procurement subgroup, this is going to show all the sections listed in sequential order, by the way, that would tie to division 00. So we can see, again, familiar section titles as well as numbers listed here. So again, this is all the sections that would be under division 00. And just as another example, we'll say that this is 00, 01, and then 02. We'll start to see all the sections listed under that. So this working within this way will obviously not have the same help as working within assemblies, especially as features become available. The idea of being able to be a little bit more adaptive is not going to be as available within the work results, but for those that are really familiar and kind of like the traditional way of viewing and knowing how to find a specification, we have this as an alternative. All right, so I'm going to pull back up our PowerPoint. Just to discuss a few closing thoughts. So a couple different things that we want to kind of talk about is the 3 ways to streamline specifications. First of which, we feel that waiting on the software to integrate with all the features that you require, we feel will be a disadvantage. Instead, we suggest developing a focused team to learn the tool, prepare to teach others, and redefine your process to take advantage of the technology's full potential. In a moment, I'll be sharing our roadmap to help your team think through adoption and prepare for some of the features that will soon be available to your firm. Second, starting early in developing projects progressively will future-proof your projects as more features become available. You'll be able to build upon your process and allow for more integrations to be available. So again, though we do offer things like the work results as a workaround, we'll limit some of the future features that we're going to be providing to you for you guys to work a little bit more intelligently. And then third, leveraging a modern tool with the assemblies-driven approach and the potential of software will begin to teach and integrate teams into specifications. We saw that there are a couple different borrowed concepts and terms that are typically used by members outside of the specifications. And this is allowing for more opportunities for meaningful input as well across your team. We believe that doing so will show firms how tighter coordination with projects will lead to greater efficiency and cleaner integration from face to face. There's a lot of value in using SpecPoint now, and as we launch now intentionally to give those who use MasterSpec as their base as an immediate solution, and others a chance to learn the technology now and understand the basics as the solution continues to grow. So as mentioned, I just wanted to talk through our roadmap to kind of help you guys think about some of the future features that will be available to your team or your firm. In Q1 of next year, we're going to start to see the ability to import content. We're also going to be releasing our project insights for helpful reporting and just an understanding of how your projects are progressing and get some reports on the projects and how they're performing. Within Q2, we're going to start to enable custom stylings, the ability to control like headers and footers and basic formatting needs, as well as track changes, author markups, some of those reviewing pieces within the functionality as well. Within Q3, we're going to start to look at next-gen Office Master update notifications. This gets into the idea of if you do have an Office Master, as MasterSpec is releasing its quarterly updates, how to integrate those in a more intelligent, automatic way. And then in Q4 and beyond, we're going to look at the Revit integration. So actually working within Revit, within SpecPoint, aside from just the assemblies approach, bringing in Revit in a more meaningful way. So now I'll pass it back over to Jason and we'll go over some questions with the time that we have remaining.
That's right. Thanks, Nick, for this wonderful presentation. We've got time for questions. Just open the Q&A located at the bottom of your Zoom window and post your questions. All right, we do have a few that have come in, Nick, so we can go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one I have is, how do I integrate consultant or other external information with SpecPoint?
Yeah, so for right now, we do not have a way to input that into SpecPoint immediately. Within Q1 of next year, that'll be something where you can import it right within SpecPoint. For now, we advise to export it into a Word or PDF version of the specifications and then combine it at that stage.
Great, thank you. Okay, next one, can the categories be filtered by uniformat or master format as opposed to alphabetical?
No, so right now those are just locked into kind of some of those facility groupings that we have. So that's a pretty rigid structure for how the categories are laid out right now.
Okay, great. Under the product selection tool, is there a delete or remove products function as these become obsolete?
Yes, and a big reason why we're going with this approach too is so that as you're making those changes to products, it's not going to influence the entirety of your content. So if there are features that have been added by the products, if you choose to remove it afterwards, those pill selections will be removed along with it. But at whatever you had specified before, so in that screen, we had showed that we had added a smooth pattern. So that option will remain the same, but things like the edge and joint detail, as well as the modular size, those will be removed. But yes, those can be removed at any time.
Perfect, okay. So is SpecPoint project-based only, or how can you manage a firm master or client proprietary masters?
Yeah, so the master piece is coming in Q3 of next year. So right now it is strictly project-based.
What is the approach to licensing?
Yeah, so licensing is based on firm size. If you are interested in purchasing this, we will have some information in the next slide as we're wrapping up. To get in touch with our sales team, we'd love to kind of talk through what makes sense for your firm. Also within SpecPoint, you are getting the entirety of Master Spec Comprehensive. So from a content perspective, we're offering a lot more content right out of the gate just through the software solution.
Thank you, Nick. All right, can custom masters be uploaded to the system?
Again, not yet. That's going to be in Q3 of next year. And then importing is going to be Q1 of next year.
Okay, and I guess as a follow-up, and how are content updates handled?
Yeah, so we're going to start releasing Master Spec updates much more frequently. Anyone who's a Master Spec customer today knows that we release those on a quarterly basis. They're going to be more frequent and in smaller batches. So whenever you go to start a new project, you'll have the latest content updates available to you. You will get a notification when you go to launch SpecPoint that there's been a content update. For ongoing projects, right now it's going to be a little bit more manual, but within Q2, Q3 of next year, we're going to be allowing you guys to manually accept or reject content updates for your projects in flight. So that's a really exciting change that we're looking forward to in relation to content updates.
Perfect, thank you, Nick. Well, I hate to say it, let's see if we can squeeze one more in. Let's see here. Can SpecPoint create color text?
So right now, the formatting is going to be quite restrictive. Those kinds of changes should be done once exported to Word or PDF. But Q1 of next year, that's when we're going to start to introduce some of our formatting changes, custom stylings, headers and footers, all that good stuff.
Wonderful. So yeah, as I said, we're running short for time. I want to thank you, Nick, for joining us. Thanks to everyone who joined and participated in the presentation. That is all the time we have for questions. If you do need to reach out with any additional questions, the contact information for the specifications team at Deltek is currently up on the screen